Well, I start, every time I start a show, I start as if I never made a show before, and absolutely from nothing. It doesn't appear that way at this time, but it did appear that way last summer, and it's very frightening, and I don't know if this is good or bad, whether this just means that you repeat your mistakes, or whether this is a very good way of saving your innocence, because it is very important to be innocent, I think, to approach a show without really knowing what's going to happen, and just to have the confidence that it will happen. This is the way that I approach the happenings too. I think it's terrifying to do it this way, but it's always a great pleasure if it works. And it hasn't failed entirely so far. There have been some things that have been disappointing, some things I haven't been able to bring off, but on the whole, I've met my obligations or my deadlines. When I develop a show, everything usually hangs together. That is after a while, one form sort of leads to another form, and there's a kind of consistency in the forms. There are maybe 2 or 3 forms that dominate the show in different guises. So there's a kind of consistency in form, and you could say almost that every show has 2 or 3 themes and variations on the themes. I find it helpful to work that way. I think I strive for a consistency, which is something that's almost never noticed by a reviewer. It's noticed, I suppose, by people who see the show, but no one ever mentions that the show as itself is a composition.
Claes Oldenburg is one of those artists for whose work the pace and texture of urban life are necessary conditions. Born in Stockholm, he grew up in Chicago, where his father was formerly the Swedish consul. It's hard to think of another artist who is more American in his outlook and in his perception of the details of contemporary life. Oldenburg came to New York in the late 50s. Now he and his wife Pat live and work in an immense loft on the Lower East Side. Along with several others, Oldenburg was one of the first to explore the vein in contemporary art, which later was to be called pop. And he was one of the originators of the new kind of artist theater called happenings. In this film, we see him working and preparing for a major exhibition of his new work.
Last summer, I went through about 2 months of what you might call inspiring myself or priming myself by reading and buying hundreds of magazines and walking the streets of New York, and I took off 40 pounds. I gave up smoking. I did all kinds of things to myself to get myself stimulated or started in some direction. And then I went through my notes, which is always a good stimulation, the notes from the past. There are many pieces that I've been intending to make, but I never get around to making, and so on. And finally, I sat down, or I wouldn't say finally, let's say at the beginning I sat down and made a list of about 50 things I would like to make. Just what came into my mind as a result of this self-priming. But gradually, as I go along, the list gets shorter. I knock out things that don't seem to be particularly important, or that can be saved for later, or that seem just plain silly. And the list gets shorter and shorter and shorter, and more realistic. Everything progresses from the wildest dreams to what can actually be done. And it's surprising how little one can do, really, when you get right down to it. But it's enough. I found that I had more than enough for this show. And I have, as a residue from thinking about all the things I could do, I have maybe 100 ideas here for future shows, which I don't know if I'll ever get around to. It accumulates. There's an awful lot of paper lying around the studio, an awful lot of sketches that will never be realized. But all you care about is that there should be, maybe out of all of this stuff, maybe there should be 50 good ideas, because you can really work a lifetime on one good idea. I write every day, and I feel very unsure about what I write. And as a matter of fact, I have a suspicion that I write them to get them out of my system. Some of them are certainly an honest attempt to explain what I'm doing to myself. But many of them are very frivolous and nasty. There's not a lot of nasty remarks in it. And really, they're kind of a way of getting the stuff out of my system. So they don't serve as a guide to my work necessarily. They're quite tricky that way. And I think they're also rather badly written. But it's a compulsive thing. The need to touch the typewriter and to make the words appear on the white page. It's something, among other things, which makes the day go by. I think it's very hard to be an artist because there's nothing going on in your life. I mean, unless you're working with something monumental like carving marble, your day goes by and you have to find all kinds of different ways to engage your senses, you know, something with the hands, or I mean, I read about poets constantly drinking tea and so on. And you have to, because I work all day long, I don't stop for lunch or anything like that. I just get up in the morning and I wander around my studio all day long, and sometimes half the night, you know, until something happens. So typing is a way of relieving the boredom of the studio. Sometimes some rather nice things come out, and I try after a show to go through the material and select out what seems valuable and true. But I'm a very poor critic of my own writing, and I really don't want to be a writer. I feel I'm much more honest in expressing myself through plastic form. I should have started becoming an artist much sooner, because I was always very interested in art and drawing. But as it turned out, I didn't become professionally involved with art until after I had been to college, and after I'd worked a year and a half after college as an apprentice newspaper reporter, which seemed like a dead end. And I then took the leap into art and into full-time studying art. But I studied mostly on my own. I had already gone to college, so I didn't feel like going through that again. So more or less I worked out the problems myself. I did go to a few classes and met some people, some other artists, and talked about the problems of being an artist. But it was really what I've done has been the result of my own analysis of what I think the thing called art is. It's mainly been through going into myself and finding rooting expression in my own daily life or my perception of nature, and a process over a number of years of sort of digging into myself and finding the form for what I discovered in myself.
In the work of Claes Oldenburg, the inanimate objects in the world around us assume an almost terrifying intensity and vitality. Enormously enlarged in size, expressively exaggerated in texture, and brilliantly colored with shiny paint, his art is a kind of unprecedented sculpture to which he brings the sensibility of a painter and the passion of someone who loves sensation. Oldenburg's early pieces were mostly about food. He made pies beyond the glutton's wildest dreams, ice cream to tempt the oldest child, hamburgers as big as tents. At first, these objects were all made of plaster and painted with enamel. Later, as the scale became even larger, Oldenburg worked out a technique of sewing the pieces in cloth and stuffing them. His interest in the most immediate and direct experience of familiar objects eventually led him from food to clothing and ordinary household things. Oldenburg gave to objects a new personality. Particularly in the softness of the later sewn pieces, we begin to feel a sinuosity, sometimes indolent, sometimes threatening, sometimes sexual, which breaks down our accustomed assurance at the distinction between animate and inanimate. Occasionally, Oldenburg has turned to other materials like wood and plastic. One of his most extraordinary ventures was the furniture ensemble called Bedroom. Like the rest of his work, larger than life.
The bedroom is one of the rooms of the house, and the first room that I tried, the second one being the bathroom. And I suppose we wanted to start with the rooms where there was most physical contact or sensuousness. But many people have interpreted this as a funereal bedroom, or as an anti-sensuous bedroom, or as the death of sensuousness. And there must be that element in it too. There is a kind of formality about the bedroom, which is frightening, especially the geometric forms. As in most of my work, there are two contradictory interpretations and impulses, and you have to make up your mind which one you want to follow, or you can follow one a little bit and then come back on the other one. So it's very hard to sum it up and to say it's any one thing. I like to look at this room. I like to pass it. It's kind of an oasis in the loft. In here, things don't change. You know, outside everything is flying around, and in here, protected by this plastic, there's a kind of like an aquarium atmosphere. Then I got involved also with the automobile. I don't exactly know why I got involved with the automobile, but this was a new theme, and there probably are some very deep reasons that I can't put my hands on at the moment why. And then suddenly the airflow floated into view, and everything came together in that area.
By a curious coincidence, it happened that the Airflow Chrysler, an advanced car of the 30s, wholly appropriate in its forms to the spirit of his work, was conceived by the father of Oldenburg's friend, the sculptor and filmmaker Robert Breer. Oldenburg photographed and sketched a restored Airflow owned by Mr. Breer.
Kind of, it's like an exploded view, and it's all types of pieces, or kinds of pieces of the car, of different size models, and different type models also within the Airflow scheme. And each part is treated differently. Some are on the floor, and some are hung from the ceiling, and some lie in the corner. And we expect to keep making these parts and to work on this thing for a rather long period of time. It's like composing a symphony compared to a shorter piece, and it's quite a job. It may be too much for us, but even if we don't complete it, we still will have a lot of stuff if we work on the idea for about another year. And we're going to have another show next year in which the Airflow idea will dominate, just as the bathroom dominated the show this year. And I expect many things to come out of it. There's quite a lot of freedom and quite a lot of possibilities. You could make many different models. I'm right now working with 6 models and 6 sizes, of which one is a full scale.
In a sense, Oldenburg's loft is a factory where he works out the problems of handling new materials in new ways with the help of his wife Pat and other assistants.
Now, working with soft sculpture, using the canvas or the vinyl, we're working with a medium that's very exploratory. And there are other ways to join the parts, for example, heat sealing, but I think sewing is more involving and complex and therefore more satisfying. It's also, sewing is very much like drawing. And also, this is like a translation of flat into round. As I make a pattern and then I give it, we trace it, and she sews it together so that then it turns into a round or sculptural object. I get a great deal of pleasure out of involving other people in my work, and this is particularly strong in Pat's case. And her sewing is also something very special. It's very aesthetic, and the pieces on which she works on become very much a collaboration pieces.
Oldenburg explores the formal problems raised in these objects by first making corrugated cardboard models and then developing patterns for the shapes to be sewn.
Well, it's necessary. It is necessary if you have set your mind to making something out of vinyl, it's necessary to make a very clear pattern to be followed in the sewing. So I started using cardboard, and I keep using it and cut it very easily, and if I have an idea, I can very quickly make a model out of it through cardboard. And that's followed by taking the pattern and making it into canvas, and if that works, that's followed by a vinyl. I think, though, that the models have a kind of directness which people appreciate. I mean, the models, I exhibit the models. The canvas pieces, they originally served a function of working out the sewing problem, but then they seem to be something in themselves, very different from the vinyl pieces. For example, they seemed proletarian in relation to the vinyl pieces, or they seemed austere, or they seemed more spiritual, less sensuous, or they seemed, well, I call them ghosts because I painted them white, and they see they had a kind of a double existence, like the thought behind, you know, like the Platonic idea behind the sensuous actuality. So there are many people who prefer the canvas pieces to the vinyl pieces for one reason or another, and usually the canvas pieces are sold for less. So there are all kinds of, you know, you could work up all kinds of feelings about one as opposed to the other.
Oldenburg's art often utilizes humor and untrammeled fantasy. Some of the best examples of these attributes are his drawings of schemes for monuments to be built in New York City.
Look at these. I mean, there's no such thing as an honest monument. I don't know of any. If I say put a hot dog on Ellis Island, which I proposed, the giant Frankfurter, then it's only because the giant Frankfurter is one of my personal objects, and I feel that in that position, in relation to the bay, it would be very well located. So, see, that would be a very good instance of how you could get in trouble by bringing the two worlds together, the world of art and the world of the people outside. A monument gets you into trouble right away. If I just made my things and called them art, but that's because I was brought up to believe that one should try to reach people, and one should try to sum up what people are feeling, and one should try to make people all into one, and so on. And even though I know it doesn't work, I keep doing it. The bathroom is the second room of the home, which I started doing a couple of years ago. I started with the bedroom, and now it's time for the bathroom. That is tied in with the idea that the home is full of sculpture-like objects, such as the sink, or the toilet, or the tub, or the appliances that you use, the toaster, the orange squeezer, and the can opener, objects that are sculpture in concept. They stand in space. It's also the fact of porcelain or enamel, that it looks so much like a patent vinyl, and it's possible to make something out of vinyl that looks like soft porcelain. That had a lot to do with this choice. But it's really to develop the theme of the home. The next step would be the living room. And I've already dealt with parts of the kitchen, but I might deal with an entire kitchen using a stove and maybe a washing machine or a dryer, something like that. I prefer a material and a subject that suggests change and flow, which is, for example, why I choose ice cream and the representation of ice cream in plaster. And here I am using a soft cloth, soft vinyl fabric,
to suggest the possibilities of change in relation to an object. That is, in the soft version of the sink, it's possible to see the sink from above and from beside and from the front at the same time, because the front of it falls down in the soft version. And also there are changes in meaning, or changes in subject matter and changes in image that happen as a result of the softness. What is identifiable as a sink takes all kinds of different forms and can be identified in many different ways if the material is changed into soft material. The whole thing is that I say this is a sink, and from there it can be almost anything depending on who's looking at it. You can always go back and say it's a sink, that it's defined as a sink, but I wouldn't want to set any limits to where the image can go after that. People will see their own images or whatever they want to see. In general, my approach is to set a limit, a general limit, and within that limit let things have a life of their own, take their own form. And that's what happens with the cloth, and that's what happens when I do a performance, a happening. I set very general limits within which people develop themselves in relation to the objects that I give them. I don't know why the toilet should be offensive to people as a subject. It has never hit me that way at all. That is, I've not chosen a subject that deliberately to shock anybody. I've just assumed that that's one of the sculptures of the home, and it's such an important and obvious part of the home that I just have accepted it. It's a highly idealized version of a common toilet. It's also magnified in scale. It's placed up on a pedestal, and everything is done to make it, to emphasize its existence as a sculpture object, to remove the association, I think, just to make you see the thing as itself. But as I say, there are many people who simply cannot see beyond subject matter. My work is always having this trouble. It's a kind of a deliberate obstacle that I make for people, because I choose a very simple subject which is usually very close to people's experience, and that might give them the idea that they can dispose of the whole thing simply by referring to their experience, but that's only the starting point, and it's, to say, it is an obstacle for many people. Well, I was watching TV or sometimes reading the newspapers, and I see the kind of general public view reflected, general public view of what I'm doing. And it's very puzzling because it's very different from what I think I'm doing and what a few people know that I'm doing. So that well, if I was, say, an artist who was removed from the objects of the world, who was, say I was an abstract artist, then perhaps this would be pretty consistent. I mean, this sense of being, of finding the general opinion strange. But because I deal with things that enter into everybody's lives, it seems that the general public should also see what I'm doing the way a few people see and the way I see. Of course they don't, and I have to accept that. The problem is that you have to, in order to get an honest piece of work, you have to follow your own feelings, and you can't listen to other people telling you what to do. If at the same time you have a desire to do things for other people, as, say, a moral purpose in making your art, which I do, then it does get confusing. Now, I don't know of any way to make art other than following my own feelings and notions. And the fact that I do use subject matter indicates that it's not just for myself. It's for other people to ponder or to be led into. And that's a kind of a traditional notion of art, is that if people can be fastened by the subject matter, they can be led into the deeper areas of the thing, which is really problems of form and balance and grace and order and, you know,
the finer things of life. I mean, my thinking is very traditional along those lines. But I find that instead of having this work for me, I find that I'm stepping on all kinds of toes, and I'm not being taken seriously, and people are not seeing what's there, and perhaps they're being led away rather than led into, and I'm becoming more and more isolated rather than more and more at one with them. That's something that I always hope over a period of time will change. But in my heart, I know it really doesn't work, you know. But I keep trying. And, however, I mean, I must say that there are a lot of people who love my work, and they tell me so. And a lot of people who see it, perhaps, you know, a comforting amount of people, I mean, more than I would expect, who see something in it and who like it.
Oh, I'm so conscious. It's a wonderful show, Claes. Beautiful.
Yeah, you are.
See you.
She was going to sew a piano, but I didn't give her the plans. I had no idea that it took so long to make plans.
Like so many others who explore new ground, Oldenburg worries about the loneliness of his path, particularly because the flavor and intensity of his work disturbs some sensibilities. The justification comes when his exhibition opens, when people arrive to confirm his special, unique accomplishment. The openness and extravagant intensity of Oldenburg's objects mean more than pleasure for our senses. He, like some of his contemporaries, insists that we examine our familiar surroundings with a fresh eye, that we discover new ways of seeing and feeling, to enlarge the meaning and significance of everyday life. Art for Oldenburg can no longer be separated from life. He shares the optimism which has become a keynote of contemporary American art.
No, I'm serious. I want to see what's going on. I haven't made, there's six possible models.
You only have two little ones here.
Yeah, the little ones. Then there's one bigger one, it's number 2. And then the parts, the insides come from other models, number 5 and number 6.
Well, this big car, does it open up? Does it have an engine in it, or is it like...
No, it'd be more the outside. What's the inside? This is the inside.
I mean, like the toilet opens up and you got inside. You don't open up the hood of the car and find water in it. You don't open up.
No.
How come?
Well, I don't know how that. It's very difficult to make a car. I mean, and then you got to ask yourself, do you really want to make a car, you know, or do you want to make? I mean, I'm just using the car as a subject. You know? I mean, it's not going to be a car. Like one may be split this way, the other may be split the other way.
Yeah. I was surprised to see the engine.
This is NET, the National Educational Television Network.